China announces 84% tariffs on U.S. goods in showdown with Trump in response to Trump's 104% tariff he put on China. And look who decided to retaliate on his own by calling out China. None other than my main buddy, Stephen Miller. Wrong way, Stephen Miller.
China is the destabilizing force here for the entire system of global trade. And everyone's put up with it, Martha, everyone. The EU's put up with it, Mexico's put up with it, Canada's put up with it, Japan, Korea, everyone. One man, one president has said, we are not going to let China extort, dominate, and control our entire system of international trade through cheating.
And this is why we love Stephen Miller. It's itsSeanDaniel here coming to you from Japan. I was about to go to bed in my hotel pajamas in Japan. I'm here on a secret diplomatic mission. Can't speak much about it. Stephen Miller hints at it a little bit later in the video. And then I start seeing China is coming back at the U.S. after the U.S. went at China. And then I see my buddy Stephen Miller talking about it. Had to make a video for you guys. Let's get right into it.
So what is the reaction in the White House to the fact that this noon deadline for China to begin some sort of discussion came and went? Will we now see a 104% tariff against China?
Well, very simply, this is about the President of the United States defending the core national security interests of the United States. China has hollowed out our defense industrial base. This is very important for your viewers to understand. America cannot create the essential materials it needs to ensure our security into the future because China has stolen those supply chains. So America, but not just America, our allies around the world are dependent on China for our own defense, for our own economic well-being. That is the national security threat the president is responding to. And he's going to take whatever actions are necessary to ensure that he can keep America safe and that we can live in a country in which American workers and American factories can supply all of the materials and needs for our national security and defense.
Is there any indication that they are about to come to the table? Because they sound pretty dug in their public comments.
I believe that China will be forced very soon to come to the table for the simple reason that China's economy is completely dependent on its exports to the United States and to the West. China has built its entire industrial strategy since its entrance into the World Trade Organization on being able to sell highly subsidized, currency-manipulated, dumped goods into U.S. markets. It is an industrial strategy from China to product dump strategically to take out American steel, to take out American aluminum, to take out core American defense industries and defense needs so that we're reliant on China. And what's happening here is that China is now discovering for the first time that they have met an American president who is not going to be intimidated, who's not going to be bullied, who's not going to be coerced, who's going to stand up for our essential security needs.
Yeah,
China needs us because of their export dependency on China.
It's going to be very interesting to see.
What Stephen just said about China needing us more than we need them is something that Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has explained perfectly.
Their exports to the U.S. are 5 times our exports to China. So they can raise their tariffs, but so what?
Exactly. So what? They need us. We're the huge consumer economy. We are the ones with the power. And it's time we start using it, like Kevin O'Leary said on CNN yesterday. Stop. Let's make China pay for all the different things they've been doing with intellectual property, with all the cheap manufacturing, the super cheap labor. We are the consumer economy. Let's use that power.
Jamieson Greer said in the introduction to our segment, which I'm not sure if you had a chance to hear, but he said the Chinese approach, which has been that we're going to retaliate. And then he said the president has recognized this, that China is the holdout, and he wants to focus on other partners. And this is what I find really interesting, and I'm curious what you can share about this strategy, because if you reorganize the trade relationships with so many of our larger partners, Canada, Mexico, Japan, all of these different entities who in varying degrees have agreed to some sort of discussion at least, does that isolate China? Because we know that China has found other routes to go through, Vietnam, Cambodia, and will these trade agreements mean that China becomes even more isolated?
Yes, well, this is part of the brilliance of the president's strategy. If you look at those original reciprocal tariff rates that were announced, who got hit the hardest? China, Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand. That's the China sphere of influence. The true trade deficit with China is $1 trillion a year because China is shipping all of its goods through other countries like Vietnam, like Cambodia, like Thailand, but also it's sending its supply components through the EU as well that they're then making it into our markets, through Canada, through Mexico. China is the destabilizing force here for the entire system of global trade. And everyone's put up with it, Martha, everyone. The EU's put up with it, Mexico's put up with it, Canada's put up with it, Japan, Korea, everyone. One man, one president has said, we are not going to let China extort, dominate, and control our entire system of international trade through cheating. All those factories that have closed over all those years because of China's cheating, someone is actually finally saying we're going to bring those factories back home. And yes, as you pointed out, making strategic trade deals that must be fair, again, to the American worker, that must reduce the trade deficit, but making those strategic trade deals with our trading partners around the world will isolate China further, and it will force China to come to the table and finally redress these decades of grievances.
Boom. Now, whether you like the tariffs or not, or you see them as some dangerous thing for the American economy, just to hear some people from the White House speak with power like that to stand up to China is awesome. And one other thing I thought about is how much do these moves impact all these other countries to pick a side? Pick a side between the U.S. or pick a side with China, one of the other massive powers in the world. Where are your guys' loyalties lie? Where do you want to have your protections or your safety protections? Do you want to have them with China, who just wants to take over everything, or do you want to have it with America? So not only is this just a direct battle against China as the other superpower in the world, but I think it also plays a role in influencing and impacting the loyalties and connections and partnerships with other countries. Are they going to go to China or us? Let me know what you guys think about that down in the comments below. But to push back on this, here's a great question that Bill Ackman, a big supporter of Trump, billionaire guy, has put out on X, and it's a good point.
He says, some have misinterpreted my thoughts on tariffs. I'm totally supportive of President Trump using tariffs to eliminate tariffs and unfair trade practices for our trading partners and induce more investment and manufacturing in our country. I am advocating for a 30, 60, or 90-day pause before the tariffs are implemented tomorrow to enable negotiations to be completed without a major global economic disruption, which will harm the most vulnerable countries, companies, and citizens. And he goes on to say more there. What is your response to that, Stephen?
Well, my response to that, in part, is why is it only described by some of our friends in Wall Street as a crisis when we correct and we answer a generation of systemic abuse against American workers? Martha, was it considered a crisis when all of our steel mills were shuttered? Was it considered a crisis when American automobile manufacturers went from dominating the entire global trade in autos to being shrunk to the point of barely having any exports around the globe at all? Right? Was it considered to be a catastrophe, a calamity, when the entire Rust Belt was frozen, its industries ripped apart? Was it considered to be an economic catastrophe when we could no longer build a ship in this country, could no longer build an airplane in this country, could no longer build a helicopter in this country, when we couldn't even provide for the basic means to defend ourselves, couldn't even build a Coast Guard cutter in this country, that our supply chains, our industrial base has been so eroded? We have a president who has now actually taken the necessary action to bring back American industrial power and might so that we will have real hard deterrence in this country, real hard strength in this country, and the middle class workers, the families, can earn an income they can retire on. They can retire with dignity,
I would
Martha. They can
imagine
earn
that
an
you would
income that
like
can
to hear
support their whole family.
That you'd like to hear some of these people maybe take a tone that thinks about some of those people a little bit more.
Yes, can they
and
think
maybe
about what people have suffered
some
over the last 20
Wall
or
Street a little
30
bit
years?
less. Yeah, no.
And by the
I
way,
hear you.
we are on the verge now, because of President Trump's strength and leadership, of fixing our entire global trading system. This is an astonishing fact. Did you know, for example, that we have a $50 billion trade deficit with Japan alone in automobiles? Here's the country we protect. Here's the country that we defend. Here's a country that's an ally and partner of the United States. Why is it that we have a $50 billion automobile deficit with Japan and another $50 billion automobile deficit with South Korea? Our troops are stationed right now in South Korea, keeping them safe and free. Our troops, our soldiers, away from home, away from families in South Korea. $50 billion automobile trade deficit with that one country alone. President Trump is going to fix our global trading relationships. And at the same time, he's going to work with Congress to make America the manufacturing center of the world with the lowest taxes, the lowest regulations, and the cheapest energy.
Normally, Stephen Miller is just a fact machine, but sometimes he's a campaigning guy, and in this one, he was a little bit of both. Now, I would argue why Japan and South Korea have better trade with automobiles compared to American automobile companies is because, as many of you guys know, they're just better, at least in my opinion. I know some of you Mustang guys might freak out at that one. But I think Bill Ackman makes a great point. And first of all, I'm just glad that Stephen Miller is getting on here to start to call out China for some of the stuff they've been doing with intellectual property, with stealing away our manufacturing, different schemes they play by trading through Vietnam, through Thailand, through Cambodia. It's awesome to hear someone from the White House come out with a powerful position against China versus so many other times we've seen in politics, in sports, in media, where we're just kissing China's butt. Oh, China, China, because they need the money from China. But Bill Ackman makes a good point. Why disrupt the whole global economy, people's companies, costs, profit margins, and then employees with tariffs that are immediately going to be put in place, and then they might get not put in place if negotiations go forth, are completed? It makes a lot of sense to me. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. But I don't know how else you would have leverage as Trump if you did a 30, 60, or 90-day pause, as Bill Ackman spoke about in his tweet. Because do you really have that much power against China, against these other countries, versus if you say, this tariff's going into place now? That one I'm not really sure about. I understand the power position Trump is playing from. It does make sense, but it's very convoluted. Let me know down in the comments below what you think. It's itsSeanDaniel here, and I'll see you in the next one. Also, I forgot, my diplomatic mission here in Japan is to fix that margin for the automobile industry here in Japan and America. I'm not supposed to tell you guys, but that's what I'm here for.